Have you ever felt that something is just off? It's not right, and you can't quite put your finger on it. You can't quite put it in words. How are you feeling? But it just doesn't feel normal. In my experience, when I feel that way, and when I've worked with others, it's because they have this feeling of being stuck. So today, we're going to focus on tall tale signs of complacency and how to move out of complacency into action so that you don't feel as if you are stuck in life. Stick with us. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. I am your host, John Espinosa. I am your host, John Espinosa, to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. Hey everyone, John here. Welcome to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. Today, we're going to talk about getting out of that feeling of being stuck. A lot of times I talk to people and they ask, how do you continue to progress? How do you continue to move forward? I just don't feel right. I have this uneasiness about me. And I'm not quite sure what it is. It's not lack of motivation. It's not depression. It's not even anxiety. They just don't feel like themselves. And I don't know if there's anyone out there that has experienced this. I've experienced it myself. But it's that feeling of being stuck. Like anything you try for some reason doesn't go anywhere. All those ideas that were once flourishing, that were all your actions, just aren't working anymore. And that is a tall tale sign that you just may be comfortable where you're at. You may be complacent. You may have achieved success. You're at the top. And now what's next? That feeling of uneasiness. And it's not people who are struggling, as I mentioned earlier. We're talking about high performers that just feel as if something isn't right. So today, we're going to talk about signs of complacency and then some ideas, some tips, some tricks on how to move out of those. I want to share a personal story. I was working at a restaurant. I've mentioned my restaurant experience many times. I find that people who work in the restaurant business, who focus on that customer service aspect, it propels them to do other things. I think if I wouldn't have had that experience, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. But I started in the restaurant business when I was very young, and I moved up in the restaurant business. I was eager to learn. I was always customer focused. So I started as a busboy and I worked my way up to dishwasher and then eventually as a cook. And I moved around to a couple different restaurants in a local chain here in Oklahoma City. I helped open up a restaurant and then eventually I landed at a brand new restaurant that was still being built. And I got to help design the kitchen. I had a lot of good friends that we recruited to come work at the restaurant, and life was good. I was comfortable. I was going to school at this time. Jen and I, she was the waitress. She came over to the restaurant. I was in the back of the house, and everything was going well. We were comfortable. I was still going to school. I still had plans of being a doctor, going to medical school. But you know what? I really wasn't working towards that goal other than going to school. I wasn't interning in a hospital. I wasn't volunteering at local community health flex. I was just happy where I was at. I was moving up in the restaurant business. I was flourishing. It was busy. It was a great time. Jen and I both were doing very well. We even were doing so well, we decided to take on the new opportunity of cleaning the restaurant. That was how we paid the mortgage. So 100% of our income was at this restaurant at that moment. Again, we didn't think anything of it. We were paying our bills. We had decent cars. The kids were healthy. We were able to pay for their extracurricular activities. We were able to go on vacations. We were comfortable. And dare I say, we were complacent. I knew that there was something more, but I had my blinders on. I refused to see it. I refused to push myself. I forgot my competitive advantage that got me to that place. And who knows, I could have been the general manager of the restaurant one day. But something happened that changed the course of our lives and forced me to understand that I never want to be comfortable. I never want to be complacent ever again. Jen and I cleaned the restaurant on a Sunday evening. We just got done working, closed down, mopped the floors, cleaned the bathrooms, threw the trash, went home for the evening. Got home. Both of us opened up that morning on Monday. So we drove. It was about a 30-mile drive into work. Everything was great that day. I was still going to school. I was taking some night classes, taking some weekend classes. So I was able to work during the day and in the evenings. The restaurant business was very flexible. That's one thing that I loved loved about it with my school schedule, taking the kids, being off for their events. But that day, something was off. As I pulled into the parking lot and I went to the back, people were standing outside, and I thought maybe the manager who was opening that day just hadn't gotten there yet. But when I got out of the car, I recognized something that to this day gives me chill bumps. People were crying. Some people had their head in their hand. And I walk up to the door and there's a letter. It said, "We are closed. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for your service." It had only been open a short amount of time, and I didn't see the writing on the wall. And I still get a pit in my stomach when I talk about it. The culture of the restaurant, the culture of that particular restaurant in a chain, it wasn't good. We had gone through several general managers, but I was so comfortable that I didn't see it. I didn't see that food sales were declining. We were ordering less food, which meant we were selling less food. But I was so comfortable that I didn't see it. And sometimes for those out there, and you may be in complacency right now, where everything is going good, you're comfortable, and things begin to happen around you, whether it's decline of sales, or maybe people start leaving the organization, senior leaders leave the organization, people around you start leaving, but you have your blinders on. Everything's going to be okay. I'm comfortable. All my needs are being met. Well, I will tell you that day, I promised myself that I would never let that happen to my family. So today, when we talk about complacency and we identify some signs of complacency, I want you to think a time in your life, maybe it's right now, that these signs are apparent, but you're not looking. And it doesn't have to be a business. It could be a relationship. Maybe there's people around you that you're outgrowing and they begin to criticize. You don't pay attention to that because you're comfortable. Maybe it's a degree program that you're in and it just doesn't feel right. But guess what? That's what you told everybody you were going to do. You were going to be an engineer. You were going to be a doctor in my case. I had told everybody that I was going to medical school. If you ever asked me what I wanted to be, I wanted to grow up to be a doctor. I wanted to help others. But when the signs were pointing that I wasn't going to be able to get into medical school, it didn't matter because I was comfortable. I was complacent. So let's dig into the 4 signs of complacency. And then we're going to talk about some ways that you can get out of those. Because there's one thing that holds true, and I'm a testament to this, that if you are complacent, there's always a way to get out of that. It's growth, so it's going to challenge you and it's going to be uncomfortable. But for me, personally, it was the best thing that could have happened was that restaurant closing. I probably wouldn't be here recording this podcast if that sign on the door would have said closed for remodeling. See you next week. But it forced me to get out of my comfort zone, to move on to other things, to actually get a job in the hospital, to actually try to do what I had told everybody I was going to do. So next time you get that uneasiness feeling, check yourself and see if one of the 4 things we're going to talk about is something that you're experiencing. So let's get into this thing right here. One thing that I want to start off with is complacency is one of those things that we don't like to talk about. Nobody likes to say, hey, I'm stuck. I'm not growing. But the fact of the matter is that even if you are comfortable and you're just living life, but there's no growth, people are passing you by. Life is passing you by. So even when you are stagnant, think of stagnant water. What does it do? It starts to grow algae. The mosquitoes come in. That's exactly what complacency is. It's that stagnant water. It starts to stink. But what happens when the dam breaks and you get that running stream? Now it's fresh. There's life. The fish, the birds, whatever else lives in the stream, the river. That's progress. So the first thing I want to talk about, people who are complacent tend to want all the control for themselves. And that was me. I wanted to be safe. I wanted that control over my life. I grew up in the restaurant business. I started when I was 15 and a half. I worked there for 7 years in the same restaurant chain, the same menu. Now we tweaked the menu a little bit, but I did not want to give up that comfort, that control that I had. I worked with the same people for the majority of the restaurant tenure. I didn't have to learn new names. I didn't have to learn too many new faces. People would come and go, but there was a pretty strong core of wait staff, of cooks. I didn't want to give up that control because when things are out of control, what does that that feel like? Chaos, uneasiness. But I see people all the time who do this, whether it's micromanagement of their team. It may be a task that they're the only ones that think they can do. So you have to audit the things that you are doing, the things that you think you're the only one can do those things. Because I promise you, there's very few things that you cannot delegate, that you can't hire out, that somebody can't come in. Now, they might not do it as good as you do it. And we've talked about delegation and how leaders, how people fear delegation because they're giving up the control. Well, they're not going to do it as good as I do it, or they're not going to do it the way that I do it. But that's okay, because when we have all the control, we also have complacency. That's where we're living. We're living in a world of complacency when we keep all the control. So one way to avoid complacency when it comes to 100% control is to delegate. Do an audit on all the tasks that you do on a day-to-day basis. And I'm still auditing my tasks. I'm getting better at it. It's one of the hardest things as a leader that we can do. And even for ourselves, because leadership starts with you. We're talking about everyday leaders. You may not have a team. You may be the one person in the company, in your business, in your life. You may be leading your family, and there's things that only you can do. Mowing the grass, doing the lawn work, working on the car. Too many times, I think our children are sheltered because we have all the control. We don't delegate. We don't show them how to do just the simple things around the house, so they get out on their own. And guess who they're calling? Because we were complacent. We didn't want to give up any of that. We didn't want to show them because, they wouldn't do it as good as we do. Or they may ruin the weed eater or the lawnmower, and they run over branches or run over sticks. Or maybe you didn't want to delegate in your company because you were the only one that can talk to people. You were the only one that could open the doors in the morning. That's not true. So to avoid being complacent, having all the control, you have to audit the tasks. You have to learn how to delegate. It's one of the most important things that you can do for yourself because that creates capacity in others. The next thing we're going to talk about is groupthink. And this happens in really good organizations. Remember, we're talking about high performers here. We're talking about people who do things at a very high level. And when we have that groupthink mentality, I see it a lot in organizations that have been around, that have a great culture. You don't get too much turnover. But when somebody new comes in and they see things just a little bit differently, whoa, what are you talking about? What are you trying to change? Don't change anything here. Everything's working. We're comfortable. We're meeting our metrics. We're meeting our goals. What are you talking about? This automation thing. AI, that's something that I see on TikTok. That's something that I hear people talk about, but we don't need any AI. Do you have groups? Do you have teams? Do you have organizations? Even in your family environment, how many times maybe a stepdaughter, or how many times in your family environment, maybe an in-law comes in, a son-in-law, a daughter-in-law, or maybe the in-laws of your kids, and they start questioning things. And you're like, nah, you're an outsider. You can't question things. It's that groupthink mentality. It creates a very stagnant feeling, that stagnant water. Well, this is our water. We need it. What if we go thirsty? What if everybody else runs out of water? Well, as that water isn't turning over, guess what? It's getting algae in it. The mosquitoes are coming. So groupthink is a tall tale sign of complacency. So how do we avoid that? How do we avoid groupthink? We open up our minds. We become curious. I talk a lot about the more that I grow personally and professionally, the more curious I get. The less I have to know because I'm curious. I ask questions. I may know the answer myself, but in order for us to grow, in order for us to innovate, in order for us to be the leaders that we can be, that you were born to be, we need to be curious. So next time you catch yourself or somebody else in the organization, in the team, in the family that questions an outsider, an idea that may just be off the wall, sit back a little bit and say, I'm interested in that. Tell me more. Help me understand. You all know how to ask good questions, but just be open to that idea. Number 3 is ignoring our competitive advantage. So again, highly successful individuals, they have gotten there probably on hard work. Maybe there was a pain in their life, credit card debt, a goal that they wanted to pay off and be debt free. In our case, it was to help our daughter through college, to help our son buy their first home. And you work to achieve that. And then when you achieve that, guess what? We forget what got us there. We forget that we put in those extra hours. We forget that our communication skills, our ability to build relationships, created our network. So how to avoid ignoring your competitive advantage? Keep an edge. Non-negotiables, I talk a lot about creating habits. I have 4 non-negotiables. I make sure that I exercise or sweat 30 minutes a day. I do 30 minutes a day of personal development. I connect with 3 people a day, and I make sure that I don't miss 2 days in a row. Those are my non-negotiables. Rain, sleet, snow, good day, bad day, whether I'm down on myself or I'm riding that wave. That consistency keeps my edge, so I never lose sight of my competitive advantage. And then last but not least, and this is something that organizations, teams, families forget, success breeds complacency. You know, all the 3 that we've been talking about, highly successful people, they tend to do what works, and that brings success. But once success is achieved, once they have reached that pinnacle, then they stop growing. That water gets dammed off. Well, I've built this whole entire reservoir. This is mine. I'm going to dam it off from the streams so that it doesn't run anymore because this is my wealth. This is what I've built. I will tell you that the most successful people that I have had the pleasure of knowing, they're as hungry as they were day one because they don't forget what got them there was that hunger. And things are changing, and there's always going to be someone out there that's hungrier than you, that's going to work an extra hour, that's going to make that extra sales call, that's going to turn in that extra report on time or before the deadline, that may have that difficult conversation when everybody else shies away. So success breeds complacency. How do we avoid that? We remember what got us here. We remember what made us successful, but we don't live in the past. We keep that focus on the future. What's next? We dream big, have that big vision that others can see themselves achieving or fitting into. People will follow you if they know where they're going, but you have to paint that picture, and you have to be able to describe it, and you have to be passionate about it. Remember what drove you to do the great things that each and every one of you did and have done and are continuing to do. That's how you avoid complacency. So remember those 4 things. You have to delegate. You can't keep all the control. Make sure that you allow others to come in with ideas and be curious. Do not ignore your competitive advantage. Remember what got you there in the first place. And if you do those 3 things, you will remain successful and you will stay out of being complacent. And if you're like me, you won't let a closed sign on a restaurant dictate your life, because I made a promise that that will never happen again. So I'm working towards making sure that others don't let it happen to themselves. I appreciate you all hopping on, clicking on the thumbnail. If you like what you're hearing, click that subscribe button and share it. That would mean the world to me. It allows us to grow our Go Be Great community. If this is your first time listening in, welcome to the Go Be Great community. I'm excited to have you here, and I'm excited that you have an opportunity in front of you to stay out of that complacency mode and continue to grow, because I believe in you. Go be great. We'll talk to y'all later. Bye. If you like what you're hearing, do us a favor, click on that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, or leave a comment. That lets us know that what we are putting out benefits you. If you want additional information or resources or learn how to work with me, head on over to thejohnespinosa.com, because when we become better versions of ourselves, it helps us get others to where they're going. Go be great. Talk to everyone later.